Hi, everybody. Welcome to Crushing Doubts Q&A. I'm going to get started with the Instagram, and then we'll get the questions up and rolling. Give me 1 second. I hate this technological lag, but we've got to deal with it. Okay. In addition to hating the technological lag, as you guys may know, I also don't enjoy that Instagram is forcing me to have it be just my eyes this whole time. So if you're watching on Instagram, I would suggest just listening because we still have not fixed whatever this glitch is through our partner StreamYard that helps us to run these shows. Okay, let me get this settled here. Okay, so I am Dr. Dan Ratner. I am here to do a Q&A on mind-body symptoms. So this is Crushing Doubts Q&A every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern and 2 p.m. Pacific. And the whole idea here is that to get better from mind-body symptoms, we have to change what goes on in the mind. And we can't change what goes on in the mind without changing information. Now, why is this important? Because mind-body symptoms can vary head to toe. Anything the mind can do, the body can do, the mind can use those symptoms and cause symptoms to happen for reasons of the mind. So if we don't change what goes on in the mind, we don't change the thinking, or we don't change our awareness about the feeling, those symptoms will persist. So, the reason that I do this Q&A is that I suffered from 8 years of chronic, everyday, excruciating back pain. And it was a torturous 8 years, but it sure did teach me a lot, especially because I got out of it. If I had never gotten out of it, I'm not sure how much that would have taught me. But thankfully, I was able to resolve these symptoms by discovering the work of Dr. John Sarno. He is a great hero of mine and of many people in the mind-body community. But his work lives on in many, many ways, including the legacy of people who have gotten better from his work, but also in some people who have extended his work, and I'm included in that. So what I did when I was getting better is I looked at what worked for me, and I kind of collected information, and what ended up happening is that I developed this system, which I now call the column system, and it basically divides mind-body experience into 3 columns, which used to be 3 areas of a piece of paper. And it tells you about what's happening with these symptoms. And the reason I found this to be so important is that the main thing that got me to get past the symptoms was to get past my doubt about whether it was mind-body, my doubt about whether it was reversible, my doubt about whether I could reverse it. And I needed to have questions answered. And Dr. Sarno began to answer my questions for the first time. But I was reading what he wrote in book form. I did get to talk to him for 2 minutes once, which is a great highlight of my life. It was very enjoyable to talk to him. But it was a short thing, and he was retired at the time, so he really couldn't help me directly. And I needed help getting answers to questions. So I continued to pursue that path. Eventually, I talked briefly with a man named Eric Sherman. Eric is a great therapist, and he answered my questions in relation to what I had read in Dr. Sarno's book. And what I found is that getting those questions answered was the key in being able to get better. So that's why I do this Q&A. I'm here to answer all of your questions about mind-body experience, about how these symptoms behave, about what you need to think to get your way out of them, how you need to recognize which emotions you're having or how to do that. And it's all about what do you do to get better from the symptoms. So I'm going to be answering these questions. It's all going to be within my column system. And that relates to the three different areas, which I will describe now. There is the emotions column. It, of course, relates to feeling. And it also describes what happens with symptoms when there are onsets and upticks in symptoms. So the beginning of a symptom, or if a symptom's already been there, but then it suddenly goes up. It actually can describe when symptoms go down as well, but that's not usually as important in people's minds, even though it is important for understanding. So the emotions column covers acute onsets and upticks in symptoms, and it's about the feeling states. The doubt column is not about feeling states. It is about thinking, because whatever we're thinking up here becomes real down here in the body, everywhere. I don't know why it's up and down. It's all actually one. It is about thinking, and the doubt column describes symptoms that are very persistent, sometimes always there. So if there are symptoms that are always there, if they're incredibly persistent, if they are very recurrent, those are doubt column systems. They're based on our belief system, and whatever we believe does get channeled into the body if that's possible to happen, which it often is. Thirdly, there's the power column. The power column is about your relationship with yourself. That is not about symptom onsets or upticks. It's not about the stubborn symptoms that seem to not budge. It is about the low-level plateaus that happen later in the recovery process. So power column symptoms usually don't get discovered until a little bit later in the process. But they're incredibly important because the symptoms are actually trying to push you in the direction of what you need. So I'm going to answer these questions. It's in relation to these three columns. There is no stupid question at all, ever. I really want you to voice what is on your mind, because here's the thing. In mind-body symptoms, what goes on in your mind is what determines what happens in the body. So we have to access what happens in the mind. All right. Now I'm going to begin to answer questions shortly, but I want to mention a couple of resources that are available to you that can help. One is my book. The book is called Crushing Doubt, just like the podcast and my brand. And that's available on Amazon. And the book is reaching lots and lots of people. We just had the 1-year anniversary of the book release, and we sold well over 1,000 books in that first year, which is very exciting. I'm hoping that the second year is even more prolific that way, but not because I want book sales, because I have a dream to echo Martin Luther King. But my dream is about Dr. Sarno's message getting out everywhere. I think it's the same dream that Dr. Sarno had. But in the mind-body community, we all have the same dream. It's a movement that we're all working together on, which is to get everyone to understand this is real. And this makes a big difference to people. And it's not in your head. It's from your head. That's a line I often use, but it's a line that everybody in the mind-body community would agree with. We need this information out there. So check out my book. It's on Amazon. If you have checked out the book and you got a lot out of it, please, please, please consider leaving a review on Amazon. It makes a big, big difference. If you think about it, even I do this when I look on Amazon and I'm like, should I buy this book? Oh, look, 130 people liked it, which I wish we were at those numbers, but we're not yet. So please do not be shy. Even if it's a short review, you could say, I loved it. You don't have to elaborate that much, but the numbers even matter. But whatever you can say is greatly appreciated. I'll talk more about other resources available, including my membership group, which is available on my website, www.crushingdoubt.com. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but just in brief, it's similar to this Q&A, but it's in person. There's a lot more give and take about what's happening when, and I can just get a lot further in one sitting. I'll talk more about it soon, but I do want to get some questions answered before I do that. Okay, Amir Norhani, good to see you here, Amir. Can you elaborate trauma activation falls within which column, and what is the resolution? Okay, so first let's define what trauma activation is. Trauma activation is when a present-day moment brings you back into feeling something from the past. It's like reactivating a traumatic event from the past, and you feel like it's happening right then. Your whole body will be responding as if it's happening right then. And what trauma activation really is it's like an altered state. You enter a different state, and it takes a while to calm down and come back. And in that altered state, you can have very, very different thinking. There's lots of signs of trauma activation. Things like having a foggy brain. Suicidal ideation actually is often a sign of trauma activation. Wishing you could disappear, deep feelings of shame, not feeling connected to yourself, all kinds of signs of trauma activation. So when Amir's asking, where does trauma activation fall within the columns? It's really interesting because I would say that trauma activation falls across the columns. Now, we could say in some ways that trauma activation is a doubt column thing, primarily. Why is that? Because there are 4 forms of doubt. There is fear, confusion, lack of certainty, and unanswered questions. Well, trauma activation is fear. It's very, very strong doubt. So The first way I think about trauma activation is it's a doubt column symptom. We need to think about the doubt. The tricky part of that is, unlike with some fears, where it's more about like, oh, I think I hurt myself, or I'm worried about this, or somebody said this and it got me worried. A trauma activation is so activating of fear that you're having an emotional response. So sometimes to bring down the fear and get out of the doubt, you need to understand what is happening emotionally. But I would say, Amir, that if I had to answer it as one column, I would say doubt, because you've got to recognize it's happening. You've got to start tracking. Oh, wait, I'm in a trauma activation. I'm in a different state of mind. I can't believe what I'm saying to myself. Okay, now let's talk about how it relates to the other columns, though. It is also an emotions column onset. It is a symptom in and of itself. It's a set of symptoms that happens when an emotion happens. So why am I saying it's primarily doubt column? Because that's where you're going to need to work on it first. Ironically, if you said what is a trauma activation, it's actually an emotions column activation. That's what it is. But it needs to be worked on in the doubt column first to be recognized, calm down, then you can discover what that emotion was underneath. It does relate to the power column as well, but I wouldn't say it is a power column symptom. Power column symptoms are about plateaus, and they tend to be much more low level, but signaling something important about yourself. What trauma activation is, though, is a very important information about your power column, about whatever your relationship is with yourself, or whatever formed the way that you think about things and who you are at base. So, long answer, but I would say the main place you work in trauma activation is doubt. The main thing trauma activation is emotion. And the main thing it's informing you about is the power column. Okay. If I had just said that at first, I think it would have been too confusing. So I'm glad we got into the details. Okay. Amit Goswami says, can you also help with chronic fatigue? Absolutely. And I have helped with chronic fatigue. I have helped many people with that. One of the earliest people that I saw was a chronic fatigue patient. He is all better now, completely better. And I've had all kinds of success with chronic fatigue, lessening symptoms, getting rid of it altogether. But chronic fatigue is a mind-body condition, and I can help with it. I will say this: it's interesting because there's certain members of the of our society, really, who have these symptoms, and they can sometimes resist the idea of mind-body experience. And the chronic fatigue community is one of the most likely to do that, which I'm still kind of thinking through why that is and how I can help with that. But as long as you're open to these ideas, you can get better from any symptom that is truly mind-body. And that means 99.999% of all symptoms, at least. The chances are incredibly slim that it's anything else. Now, I will say, I'm not a medical doctor. So if you're not sure and you've never been evaluated by a doctor about these things, go get it checked out. I'm not saying it is anything structural or medical, but we need to get that checked out. When they can't figure it out, or you've been to multiple doctors and they still don't know, or if they've given you a diagnosis that we know is actually mind-body, like chronic fatigue, then you can work on it with me. Okay, thanks for that question, Amit. Susan Sereno, good to see you here. Hi, Dan. Hi, Dan and all. I'm having a flare-up now, and I can't figure out what happened, and I can't figure out the emotions. Let's see if you said anything else about it. Not yet. Okay. So, Susan, here's what we need to do when you have when you're searching for the emotional correlate of whatever the symptoms were. So, the main things you need to think about are the timing, and how does the timing fit with your known emotional themes. So, Susan, we still have not yet completed your emotions column theme list, but we're working on it. And that's going to allow us to pair it up with the timing. So this actually is a good time for me to talk about the group membership. So the group membership has major advantages, and one of them would include this. When Susan asked me this question, which I'll bring up again, I would have all kinds of questions for her. I would be like, what's the timing? And then she would tell me what the timing was. And I'd say, okay, what was going on during that time? And then she would tell me that. So I could actually look for the emotional correlate with her. Here, right now, we can do that, but we're going to need to do it a bit in slow motion because I asked the question and she's got to type it in. So actually, Susan, while I'm answering this question, I want you to tell me what the timing was, and I want you to tell me, what do you think was going on at that time? And when you're thinking about it, don't think about what was I feeling, because if you could do that, you wouldn't need me to locate the emotion. What I want you to tell me is what was actually going on. Who were you talking to? Did you read an email? Were you watching a show? Were you having a particular thought? What was the activity that was happening when it happened? Because sometimes we were thinking something during that activity and we forget until we remember the activity. Oh, yeah, I was thinking about this and then this happened. So we got to trace it. So that's one huge advantage of the group membership. By the way, the group membership is also incredibly cost effective. And it's $100 a month. I'm not saying that's nothing, but it's $100 a month to meet with me 3 times a week for meetings that are over 2 hours long. So we're talking over 24 hours a month of access with me teaching the column system through these interactions. Everybody's asking questions, saying, what's this? Which column is it? How should I be working on it? And so Susan's question here is a great example. If we were in group, I'd ask those questions and people could watch as I teach. How do we find the emotion? All right, Susan, you're going to need to get back to me on what was going on and what was the timing, and then we're going to put those clues together. A lot of times you won't feel like you understand what those clues are telling you, but that's part of my function. I have many different functions. One of them is to find out the emotion. So tell me what was going on. Now, Susan, I will say this. You have told me that your symptoms tend to be highest either in the middle of the night or sometimes when you wake up, but especially in the middle of the night. If you guys are having symptoms that are onsets or upticks in the middle of the night, it is usually related to dreams. There is a lot of emotional life happening during that time period. Our unconscious minds are very active. And so I'd be looking for that. So I just wanted to put that out there, Susan, since that might be part of what's going on. And if you cannot remember what your dreams were, guess what? You're still not stuck. I am like a detective of symptoms. And what you do then is think about what was happening the day before. Because whatever you're dreaming about in a given night is at least partially about your past and who you are, and partially about the very day before. So think about what happened then. Okay, Susan, let's do follow-up as needed. Hi, Dan. I just listened for the second time to your video called The Power of Self-Esteem. It has some amazing ideas and pointers. Could you go over connecting symptoms with the 3 columns? Okay, let me think about what you're saying here. Could you go over connecting symptoms via the 3 columns? Okay, so I'll do that in a second. First of all, let me say I'm glad you watched the video. I'm glad it felt like it had a lot of great ideas. It's interesting too, because I film these videos and I keep going and going and going. And sometimes I'm like, I don't remember what I said in there. But I'll tell you what, every time I watch a video of mine, I'm like, yep, I agree. And that's a good sign. This is a system that is very well thought out. I put a lot of effort into it, always making sense altogether. And so I'm glad that you found that, Harriet. And maybe that's one I'll rewatch at some point. So you said, could you go over connecting symptoms via the 3 columns? So I'm going to answer that question as best I can, but you need to follow up if I'm answering a question that isn't really what you were asking, or if I'm not answering it as far as you want it to be, because ultimately these questions have to get answered to your satisfaction. So let's talk about these columns and how you connect them to symptoms. Persistent, recurrent, or always there symptoms that do not budge. You got to go to the doubt column. And how do you connect them to the symptoms? Ultimately, we have to connect whatever your thinking is to the symptoms. So let's say I'll do the doubt column first, Harriet, and then we'll move on to each of the columns. I'll give an example. In the doubt column, if you are having the experience that this symptom is not budging, but you're also realizing, you know what? I also think I'm broken. I think there's something wrong with my body. Then we can easily say, well, how can you get better from mind-body experience if you think you're broken? Dr. Sarno said we have to accept the diagnosis. that would not be accepting the diagnosis. I don't mean that critically. I'm just noting that it's true. So what we're doing, Harriet, is we're matching up that your thoughts fit with how the symptoms are displaying themselves. And that's how we work in the doubt column, is to figure out what thoughts are leading to this. What thoughts are getting you stuck? Now, when doubt comes down, because there's a flow to the columns, bring down doubt, learn about emotions, and flow into power. When doubt is down, this becomes even easier. Because when doubt is down low enough, you can start tracking symptoms because they're moving now. They're changing. In the doubt column, they're not changing. So you can't really fully connect them to a thought. You could only connect it through logic and through scientific discussions. But you can see the logic of how they're connected. In the emotions column, you get an added advantage. And that is that you can start to see there is a direct connection between what you were feeling unconsciously when it's discovered and the symptoms. And nothing brings down doubt more than when you pair an emotions column experience, an emotional experience, a feeling, to a symptom. And one of the reasons it's so compelling is because when you do it right, just right, Harriet, it will make the acute onset or uptick vanish or lessen if you're in the right ballpark, but not getting it totally right. If you get it totally right and you have no doubt, boom, that symptom goes away. I've done it thousands of times with me and with others. The power column, in terms of connecting to symptoms, that's one that you recognize when you've already brought your doubt down a fair amount so you can see what's underneath and you're not having an acute onset or uptick, but it's just kind of hanging around. It's almost like a low-level version of doubt in that the symptoms aren't really budging, but it's very low level. And then you start to look at power. And ultimately, what happens is you can connect these symptoms to the three columns by doing the work in the columns and finding it changes the symptom profile. So if a symptom is about doubt and you do doubt work, and then symptoms do start to budge, they start to move around, or you get a new symptom all of a sudden, that's progress in the doubt column. When symptoms move around, it's progress in the doubt column. When symptoms move around in the emotions column, it's not necessarily a sign of progress, but it does allow you to do the work of pairing the symptom with whatever feeling you can discover there. And then in the power column, it's about the symptoms wanting to communicate something to you. So when you're having those low-level plateaus and you finally recognize, oh my God, this is all about the deepest parts of things in me. And then you process it, and then that plateau goes. The proof is in the pudding. When the symptoms move because of what you're doing in the columns, that's proof that it works. The one seeming exception, it's not an actual exception, but it's a seeming exception, is that when you have doubt, you can be hitting on the right ideas and the symptoms can still not move because you're not certain about the ideas yet. Okay, let's talk more about it. But Susan has a follow-up. I had a difficult conversation with two good friends. It could be that I didn't think of that. That's very, very likely to be it, Susan. I mean, a difficult conversation with friends, that's not a small thing. It really is very upsetting. It can lead to lots of symptoms. So look right there. And how did we get there? We looked at the timing. We considered what was happening, and boom, there it was. It's kind of amazing. And I'll put in a plug for this. Every single person, myself included, our brains are trying to protect us from things a lot of the time. The doubt and emotions column are both psychological defenses. They don't want us hurting. And in the emotions column, they try to distract you by keeping the emotion in the unconscious. These tools that I just said to Susan, they're a way of kind of leveraging that out of the unconscious and bringing it up by just looking at the timing, and boom, there it is. And the distraction function goes, and the symptom would go down, and you get information, emotional information. The doubt column is a psychological defense that wants to protect. It thinks you're in danger all the time, but it is like a helicopter parent. You're not in danger all the time, and we have to convince it with science and logic that you are fine. Sometimes it's also about confidence with the self and trust in the self. But whatever we're going to do, we're going to get to certainty, and that's going to take away the protection function, and that's why those symptoms start to budge. All right? So Susan, that's great that you discovered that. And the more aware you become of these things, the better it'll get. I'll give one last tip to Susan about this. You discovered very likely what this is about, because that's a disruption. It's an emotional disruption. There's no way you didn't have feelings about that. And the fact that you forgot about it and then had a symptom speaks to the fact that it would be an emotions column symptom, because emotions column symptoms come from the things that we're not conscious of, and you lost track of that. No disrespect about that or no criticism about that. That's just a sign that, yes, the emotions column works. The tip I have for you, Susan, is now ask yourself, what was the worst part of having that difficult conversation with your two good friends? What was the worst part or parts of it? And that will reveal some themes. We're going to keep exploring that, okay? Okay, Ahmed has a follow-up too. What about trauma? Can it keep you stuck? Okay, let me say this first. Nothing can keep you stuck except for lack of information. And doubt continuing to run, but doubt continues to run if you don't get the information. So my system can give you the information and it can get through anything, any doubt, any trauma, any situation, any symptom profile, any personality profile. It does not matter. The columns can find your way through that. And so trauma, really, it's just about knowing how to access the information, how to work with the information, and what to do about it. So trauma can't keep you stuck. It can make things difficult, let's say, sometimes. Like sometimes I do power work with people and they start to get very activated. And it's because we didn't know there was a lot of trauma underneath and the trauma is getting activated. So then we might need to kind of slow down a little bit and reorganize in the doubt column about how we're going to work, and go a little bit slower even in the emotions column to discover what's going on. So it could potentially slow things down. It also could speed things up because it's become so clear what's happening. But the bottom line is, no, it can't keep you stuck. It can only keep you stuck if it succeeds in getting you to doubt and essentially stop doing the work. If you're willing to do the work, then you will get there. Speaking of doing the work, as I said, I really want to encourage people, use the membership group. It's not just these Zoom classes with me. They're recorded, so you can go back and watch and continue to learn. You can also write written questions on my Q&A, which this is important for multiple reasons, but one of them is this. Over time, I suppose this is a good problem to have, but over time, I hear from so many people now that it's hard for me to respond on emails. And this site gives me one place I can do it. It's a place where you get responses faster. So it just works better for everybody. So consider, if you want, joining the membership, and it's a way that I can help you. I can kind of coach you through things. As I said, it's 3 sessions a week. Those are Mondays from 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern, Tuesdays from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern, and Wednesdays from 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern. I put them at those times so that people across the world could at least find one time that works for them. Speaking of which, I've got somebody here from Australia who I just recently met, and she's able to make one of those group times work, so I'm glad. Marilyn said, are your videos, for example, Power of Esteem, on your website or your YouTube channel? So they're on my YouTube channel. They're not on the website. The YouTube channel is under the name Crushing Doubt. You can also hear these on Apple Podcasts. So those are the 2 places to get it, Marilyn. And I even have a list of like the basic podcast episodes that are good to watch. And on YouTube, that's particularly easy because you can go to the playlists and you could say getting started in the doubt column. And you could watch the videos I most recommend for that, or getting started in the emotions column or power column. Same thing. Power of self-esteem would be in the power column. So the place you would find that most likely would be, well, actually, I don't know. I don't even remember if I have them in my playlist of where you should start. But if you searched Crushing Doubt, Dr. Dan Ratner, Power of Self-Esteem, or just Crushing Doubt, Power of Self-Esteem, it should come up. Shelby, good to see you here. Your famous saying, you make sense and so do your symptoms. How do you see this for me? Maybe this is an offline question and that's okay if so. No, this is a great question. So first of all, let me introduce that to everybody. I have a line that is kind of the basic idea that I talk about in this work that keeps people focusing on how to understand these things, which is, I say, you make sense and your symptoms make sense. Um, and so Shelby, for you, you're the same. Everybody's the same. So if you're thinking that you don't make sense or your symptoms don't make sense, that's just doubt. It's doubt convincing you of something that can't be true. And when I say it can't be true, what do I mean? Well, what I mean is, one of the advantages of the columns is that they basically describe how symptoms work. They're like the laws of physics of the mind and body. I have studied them so carefully and so with such an open mind that I could be wrong. So I've been assessing that the things I came to, I was like, this is true. This is real. Like when symptoms go super, super high, the laws of the physics of the body tell me that one of two things is happening. Either fear is way up, that form of doubt, because that's what leads symptoms to go the highest in the doubt column, or there's an amazingly big emotions column event going on. And then we just look at, well, is it an onset or uptick, or has it just gone up, gradually over time and then gotten really high, which that would be more of a doubt column, fear-related thing. But those are the only two reasons that it would be. And that's just the way symptoms work. I didn't make up the rules, but I just studied them. I studied them. I organized them. I labeled them. I can communicate what they're doing. But this is just the way the mind and body work. So it makes it really easy, actually, when I'm working with you guys to know how I can advise you, because the symptoms are telling me everything I need to know. So Shelby, back to you. What do I think about you and your symptoms? I think the same thing I think with everybody else. You are operating under the exact same principles. Now, in specific, I will say when your symptoms are super high, you have a lot of fear. It's very driven by fear. It's very driven by trauma activations. And so, like I said to Amir, the thing that I would want to be working on first with trauma activation is to help you recognize that's what's going on so that the doubt doesn't continue. You got to recognize that's really what it is. It's truly an altered state. Oh, Shelby, I missed a comment you had said before. Trauma activation is absolutely an altered state. Trust Dan, he's on point. Thank you. And I agree with you. Okay, I actually realized I missed Marilyn's earlier comment, and I'm going to bring that up now. Sorry about that, Marilyn. Okay, hi, Dan. Great to chat with you yesterday. Same here. Look forward to many more. Yesterday, I had a 3-hour shift at a local voluntary organization, and as usual, my thoracic pain kicked in after about an hour. By the end, I was in agony. Any tips on how to deal with this, or is it part of my doubt? Okay, so wait, let me back up and read that one more time. I'm just looking for some clues. Yesterday, I had a 3-hour shift, and as usual, my thoracic pain kicked in after about an hour. What are the key words here? As I see it, as usual is the key set of words here, because what that's telling me is this is recurrent. This happens all the time to Marilyn. So when things happen all the time, I go straight to the doubt column. If you told me I've never had that happen before, but there I was and boom, something went up, then I'd be doing the kind of work that I did with Susan, where I'd be looking in the emotions column for what led to this onset or uptick. But when you say as usual, that tells me there's a thought process going on here. And it's usually around the same time. Your pain kicks in after about an hour. So Marilyn, what's probably happening there is that you have a belief, which I'm not saying this critically, I'm saying it supportively, but you have a belief that pain is going to come on after an hour. And then it does, which just feeds that belief. But we can break that belief by doing some basically personal scientific tests, which is, but what will happen if you do the same shift, but you're thinking something different when you do it? So I have another line, speaking of lines, which is, it doesn't matter what you do. It matters what you're thinking while you do it. I'm going to say that one more time. It doesn't matter what you do. It matters what you're thinking while you do it. So think about what I'm saying to Marilyn here, and Marilyn, you think about what I'm saying. When you do that 3-hour shift, it doesn't matter that you're standing for 3 hours or doing whatever you're doing for 3 hours. What matters is that about 1 hour in, you're expecting that pain will come on. And so we would want to work in the doubt column. Yes, that is part of your doubt. And we need to get at what are you actually thinking? So let's talk about what happens in the doubt column. There are 3 steps in the doubt column: observe, articulate, and counter. Observing doubt is to notice you're having a doubt. So let's say you're having that 3-hour shift and then the pain comes on in an hour. If you're thinking, this always happens, it's just part of my physical problem, you're not observing the doubt. You're not calling it into question. That's what observing it is. It's saying, wait a minute, am I having a doubt here? Let me think about that. That's observing the doubt. The next thing is articulating, which is just what it sounds like. Put it into words. I'm not saying this is exactly right. I'm still just getting to know you, but maybe you're saying, I've got this damage. I believe I have this damage to a certain part of my back. And if I stand too long, then that's going to happen. That's articulating the doubt. The advantage of articulating the doubt after it's been observed, because if you don't observe it, you can't do any work on it. And if you don't articulate it, you don't know what you're working on. The advantage of putting it into words is you can now counter it. Now, wait a minute. Here's just an example, Marilyn. Not saying this does or does not apply to you, but it just shows you an example. You could say to yourself, wait a minute, but I did stand for like 3 hours at another time. Now we're on to something, because that's not making sense. And when I say you make sense and your symptoms make sense, you do. So when things don't make sense, we need to see why. So if you were able to stand for 3 hours in one situation, but not in another, it's not structural. It's automatically ruled out. Now, it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what you think. But what I'm saying can be a helpful input. So I would want you to think, Marilyn, about what were the thought processes here? What doubts might be there? You asked, any tips on how to deal with this, or is it part of my doubt? It's part of your doubt, 100%, because you said as usual. Okay? Let's do follow-up as needed, but that's good information, and I hope it helps you. Okay. Okay, Marie S., good to see you here. Dan, a new set of symptoms: heavy legs with cramps, cold feet, and toes sometimes turning blue. Began after a family conflict. For a while, these symptoms were replaced by others, but now they've returned, and the family conflict is still ongoing. Can I be reassured that this could be mind-body related? So, first of all, in terms of could it be mind-body related? Absolutely. Is it mind-body related? I would very much guess so. Yes. The only question I have is, have you ever gotten it evaluated by a doctor? Because I'm not a medical doctor, it would be great if you did. But if you've already been evaluated by a doctor and they either can't figure what's going on, or they have some kind of half-assed answer, or they give you a diagnosis that we know in the mind-body community is a mind-body symptom, then you can blow right past that and treat it as mind-body. I have a very strong suspicion that that is what it is. And actually, we have some evidence even in what you wrote. So you said, first of all, the symptoms began after a family conflict. The chance of that being randomly 2 separate events, totally medical and physical, versus this family conflict, doesn't seem very likely at all. Seems much more likely that they were causal. Now, here's another clue. For a while, these symptoms were replaced by others. Medical and structural issues don't get replaced by others. You don't break your arm and then feel like, oh, but it was fine actually for 3 days when I had, pain in my leg. If it was replaced by others, it's another sign of mind-body. So that's 2 strikes against is not being mind-body. Now they've returned and the family conflict is still ongoing. So the symptoms coming back within the conflict, especially if it's around timing, that would be a 3rd strike against it not being mind-body. Marie, I'd bet a lot of money that this is mind-body. But if you haven't been checked out by a doctor at all, I would find a good doctor who you can trust. Maybe it would be best to go to somebody in the mind-body field, someone like Howard Schubiner or Becca Kennedy or David Schechter. There's lots of great ones. And just get it checked out to be sure. But everything is pointing in the direction of this being mind-body. So when you ask the question, can I be reassured that this could be mind-body? Absolutely could be, and very likely is. But let's get back to me about what you've done already, and I can weigh in even more about it. Okay. We got a couple questions left for tonight. Harriet said, "Thanks, Dan. I was thinking more of how I can use the power column to help diminish the pain. It seemed like you said in the video that you can start in the power column and then go to the other two. So the columns are for use whenever you want to use them. They really are just describing the three different parts of you from a mind-body perspective. And you certainly can do that. But at the same time, I make certain recommendations at certain times. And what I'm seeing, Harriet, in your profile is that we were doing power column work, but it was actually making your pain. I don't know if it was making it go up, but it was not making it budge. And why? Because you have doubt. If you've got doubt, that's where we start working. So the flow of the columns is bring down doubt, learn about emotions, flow into power. So as I said in the video, you can start in any of the columns. That's fine. When I say this flow, you're not locked into that. It's just that the way the columns tend to flow is that it's hard to see what's going on emotionally if doubt is high. And it's hard to step into power if doubt is high. And that's especially true with something I call level 1 doubt, which is doubt about whether it's mind, body, or not. That's kind of the baseline doubt. And so, Harriet, if you have any of that, we really need to work on that first. If you've gotten past that, though, and you've gotten past level 2 doubt, which is my mind-body symptom is harder to conquer than other mind-body symptoms. If you've gotten past those two, and we're at level 3 doubt, I'm not sure I can do it. That's actually where we would go to the power column to work on the doubt. It would be doing doubt column work through the power column. And maybe that's part of what you're asking. Maybe you're at that point. And if you are, we'll do that work. Because I have so many different sayings at this point, but one of the things that I often say is that you resolve doubt with science and logic. You have to get to certainty about the symptoms. But in the power column, there's no science and logic of you, and you have to get certainty about you. What happened to you? Who are you? And what do you need? So doubt column symptoms get resolved about certainty about those symptoms and how they work and that they're reversible. And power column work helps you get to certainty about you. So we can work there, Harriet. We just got to make sure that there isn't level 1 or level 2 doubt that's preventing you from really diving into that work. Okay. Susan had a follow-up here. The worst part of the conversation is, do I risk the friend getting mad or keep my power? So here's what I think, Susan. You don't have to rush to do anything about this, but I want to err on the side of keeping your power. I want you to not be ruled by somebody getting mad, because somebody getting mad, if they're a true friend, they'll either come back and listen or give it a chance, or maybe they won't get mad in the first place. But here's another advantage of group, Susan. We could go through and talk about what's happening here and how can we help you strategize it. But I think ultimately, when you're feeling like I've got a truth here that I got to keep to myself, sometimes we have to do that because it's, maybe not the best idea at that time, or it's not kind or something like that. But when it really undermines your power, that's where we get into trouble, and something's got to be done. So if I had to just choose one of the sides of these, I'd say keep your power. But we could strategize how. How do you phrase it? How do you talk about it? How do you situate yourself? Or how do you even keep your power inside yourself? Maybe you don't need to say something to that friend, but you do have to keep your power. Okay, 2 more questions and we'll finish up. Hi, Dan. I feel I'm moving into certainty. I've realized whilst I've progressed, I have still had the belief that if I allow myself to feel an emotion, I will be overwhelmed. Guess what? It's not true. That's right, Debbie. This is the kind of certainty I'm talking about in power, by the way. Debbie first got to certainty about the symptoms, that they were mind-body, that they could be reversed, and even that she could reverse them. Then she had to work on how. And now she's getting to certainty about herself, about different parts of her deeper emotional experience. So she had this belief that if I allow myself to feel an emotion, I will be overwhelmed. Guess what? It's not true. Music to my ears. Guess what? It's not true. This is what Debbie's coming to. It's certainty. Certainty is very helpful. And I talk about this certain concept, which is that there's certainty, and then there's what I call earned certainty. Earned certainty to me is much better because certainty can happen when people are certain about things they're totally wrong about and they haven't really taken a look at. Earned certainty means you've taken a very, very good look. You've seen it from all different angles, and now you know. And that's what I'm hearing, Debbie, in what you're saying. There's some earned certainty there, and you earned it by looking at it and doing this work. So bravo. Okay, Marilyn, we'll finish up on this. Thanks, Dan. Very helpful. But I have to ask this. Is my pain definitely TMS? TMS is tension myositis syndrome, which is what Dr. Sarno called mind-body symptoms. First crushed T7 diagnosed approximately 3 years ago, T8 last year. Okay, so Marilyn, first of all, because I'm just meeting you, and I probably need to find out a bit more about what's been said about that. But I will say this. I know lots of people who have had crushed vertebrae and other supposed medical conditions in their back that actually have no correlation with the pain at all, which is interesting. Now, I'd have to find out a bit more about this. And this is really the question at hand. Most of your pain is definitely TMS, as we've talked about. But is there pain in relation to this or not? I would guess that this is TMS. Pretty strong hunch. I just want to ask you a couple of questions. And if we can do that in group, that makes it even easier. But I want to hear what doctors have said to you. I want to hear how the symptoms profile. And ultimately, we can figure that out. But I would be utterly surprised if this is anything but mind-body. So we'll start there. I know that doesn't give you the full certainty yet, but try to think about it this way. We're in exploratory mode. We are trying to get to that earned certainty. And that means we've got to look at these facts. If I just said, yes, it is, you might not even believe me that much because I haven't even heard all the facts. But I'm going to hear all the facts, and I'm pretty damn sure we're going to end up on, yes, this is mind-body also. Okay. I do hope that helps, Marilyn. I'm not meaning to raise doubt in saying, well, I need to hear a bit more. I'm not needing to hear a bit more because I think it might not be mind-body. I'm actually the opposite. I want to hear more so that I can tell you why it is definitively that. Okay, we'll finish up on this. Shelby says, always thrown off when people say your symptoms are trying to tell you something. Okay, so when your symptoms are trying to tell you something, that's only a part of the columns. In the doubt column, your symptoms are not trying to tell you anything. You're having symptoms because you're terrified or your doubt's high. Not trying to tell you anything, except it's dangerous. Don't go here. And that's not true. In your emotions column, actually, your symptoms are usually not trying to tell you something. They're trying to hide something. So in the doubt and emotions column, these psychological defenses are not trying to tell you something. Where your symptoms are trying to tell you something is underneath it all in the power column. The ultimate goal it has is to get you some kind of bigger information about you and how you're living and what needs to happen. Okay, I hope that's helpful. Guys, it has been a pleasure being here with you tonight. I will be here the same time next week. That's 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. And please join me in asking your questions. We need to get your questions answered so that you can change what goes on in your mind, because that's what changes what goes on in the body. Marilyn says, thank you, Dan. Pretty damn sure is pretty damn good enough for me. Okay. Excellent, Marilyn. We're off to a good start. Thank you, guys. I look forward to seeing you guys next week. And if anybody wants to come see me in my group, it's at www.crushingdoubt.com. It's $100 for the month. And you get all of this time learning from me and the group members. It's also a fantastic group. They're so supportive, so good. And people really grow there. We're seeing amazing results. We also share wins. So you hear these encouraging things. And unlike other groups, unlike any other group I can think of or I've ever heard about, I'm constantly monitoring for what's being said and whether it will cause doubt. And so don't be afraid that you're going to come there and get your doubts raised. At the very least, I will be working to help you interpret what you're hearing in ways that do not bring up your doubt. Okay, guys, it is a pleasure. I look forward to seeing you next week. Keep the questions coming. Thanks so much.